Hi, I seem to be stumbling upon more and more of these forgotten games each time, and I think that this video is stacked too. I have an unusual animal simulation in it, an arcade title that looks like 80s gamers' wet dream, a very simple but cute classic console RPG, probably the best and craziest multi-genre co-op game ever made, and finally, a title I've spoke about once or twice in the past, and it's an absolute classic. So if you're curious, let's check them out. Lion is an excellent wildlife simulation and a sequel to year prior's Wolf. As much as the titles themselves may not be very creative and are straight up to the point with what they are, the games, and especially the Lion that we're talking about today, most definitely are not lacking in the creativity department. I mean, how often do you get to walk in the shoes of, excuse me, my bad, I obviously meant run around in the pose of the nature's most majestic creature. You know, laze around, basking in the scorching sun of vast, beautiful and full of life plains of Serengeti. Or even hunt antelopes for yours and your cub's dinner. Now, I'm no expert, but from what I know, very few people manage to complete a full transformation from a person to cat, not to mention a lion. I mean, the only person that I know for a fact managed to achieve that incredible feat of nature was Maureen Ponderosa, and sadly, she's not here anymore to tell her tale and explain how she'd done it. Like most cats, she walked rooftops at night, meowing into the full moon, but totally unlike them, being of an average human size, she fell from one, breaking her neck near instantly. Not gonna get into more details, as it's a long and kinda irrelevant to our today's game story. Anyway, the game allows you to portray, and by doing so also learn about being a lion or a lioness. Depending on where and when you are in the game too, you are either a lone big cat scouring the savannah, a mother having to take care of her cubs, or in control of a whole pride of even 20 others as an Omega, nay, Giga Chad lion boss. And while I wouldn't say that the possibilities of becoming different kinds of lions are endless here, there's definitely a lot, and it sure beats learning about them from perfectly preserved skin rack lying around someone's fireplace, zoo visits, books, or even documentaries like The Lion King. Don't question it, I know what I'm saying, it's a documentary. After all, everyone knows that lions speak and like to hang around meerkats and warthogs. Fact. The game has three primary modes of play: Scenario, Simulation and Safari. The last, despite its naming, it's not all about hunting lions, be it with a rifle or a camera, an educational resource if you will, that is a more interesting alternative to traditional ways of learning about the big cats. It features pictures, walls of text on the subject and rather well done voiceovers. It's packed to the brim with cool tidbits of knowledge and curiosities about lions, and also a mode you're least likely to ever get into, as you came here for games, and not to learn about nature. I mean, you may also be here for my cringe jokes, but you're not gonna find any in that mode of gameplay. The scenario mode, as its naming clearly suggests, is a series of different scenarios told from your lion's life perspective. Some of them are very realistic, like hunting for food to feed your cubs, trailing a particular animal or running away from hunters, and sometimes it's something bizarre and out there, like seeking an animal that came to you in your dreams. In between these scenarios, which you should really treat as singular disconnected scenes, nay, moments from your lion's life, you are being told the story of what happened to your lion, or lioness and her cubs if applicable, so it feels as if you were playing an important, decisive part in its life and only given control where it most matters. I wouldn't go as far as calling it role-playing, but it's definitely very cinematic feeling. Most of the objectives that you complete in this mode have a time limit, so while you're not gonna necessarily have to run for it all the time, you will need to try to get them done in a timely manner. And finally, the simulation mode, which in my opinion is the best of them all, because it sees you live out the entire life of your chosen lion. And it means that you can take it day by day and not be locked into any pre-assigned and pre-chosen objectives. Well, you do have to pick your animal's gender when you start, but everything else plays out as it happens and is not scripted. So for instance, if you play as a lone male lion, you can find the pride of others, join it, work your way up within its ranks, and finally challenge its alpha male for leadership. If you win, it will become your pride, and it will follow you indefinitely or until you die or are challenged and lose yourself. You can also build a pride of your own, accepting other lions into it, without proverbial stepping on anyone else's paws. It is not all about the group life though, and you may decide to try to make it on your own, hunting your own food, killing cattle bred by humans, or even in extreme cases, feeding yourself on already dead carcasses. It doesn't sound great, but it's an option too. And since we're on the subject of feeding, before you do any of the fun, dangerous or interesting things you can do as a lion, and there's quite a lot of these actually, you have to take care of the basics. So eat, drink clean water, rest and not die. Well, believe it or not, but it's not dying that I find the toughest in the game. And it's always hunting that I have the most issues with in both Wolf and the Lion. Hunting sees you spending much more time sneaking around your future prey, hiding in bushes and behind trees, waiting for it to lose focus rather than going for the actual kill. And especially because while they're strong, lions are not really animals known for their stamina. So while they're capable of sprinting, they are not gonna run fast for long. In short, to do well in lion, you gotta get under the beast's skin and think like it. And it's perhaps not a surprise to anyone, but I'm a simple man and can only think like one. Sometimes like deranged, bent on conquering the world AI too, but never like an animal. So knowing when to wait, when to hide, and when to sprint while tracking my soon-to-perhaps-be dinner is not something I'm very good at. And all the gazellas, zebras, and even giraffes are pretty much safe when I'm around. Staying alive by avoiding humans, though, now that I'm very good at. And you should train to be too. As more often than not, humans, regardless if they're armed with rifles or spears, mean death. They are, after all, the most expansive, aggressive and deadly species on our planet. Now, to do well in lion, you'll need to first and foremost learn how to understand and use all of your senses. By far the most important of them all, other than the sight, are hearing and scent. They can point you in a direction of a particular animal, warn you of dangers, and tell you more or less the distance between you and the source of that particular noise or smell. It's worth noting that if you have your own pride, you have access to few extra bits and pieces of info. Not only all lions in it have their own unique stats, but also names, backstories, and even kill counts divided per animal. So it's easy for you to track which of them are pulling their weight and which are a burden on your group. Your ultimate goal in lion, it being the wild animal simulation, is to survive and breed. You know, like an animal would. And while it sounds simple when spoken about, achieving all that when playing is another thing entirely. As breeding is not only about finding appropriate mate and conceiving, but also about keeping the cubs alive and raising them into the adulthood. Lion is an amazingly captivating title that all fans of the unusual games should definitely try out, and I'm sure that many of them would appreciate it. If you're in the market for something new and unlike anything else, don't sleep on it. Geometry Wars Retro Evolved is a fantastic single-screen retro-themed action shooter. And I don't mean it in a "you'll have a blast for 15 minutes playing this gem" kind of a way, and more like it will haunt your dreams and invade them with nightmares each time you put away your gamepad too early. Rarely, such a simple concept manages to outshine considerably bigger, multiple A games with its basic gameplay mechanics and unexpectedly addictive loop, and this is one of these titles. But let's start at the beginning, where most things do. Well, other than Christopher Nolan's movies, which tend to start anywhere but the beginning. Geometry Wars released on a brand new by the 2005 Xbox 360 consoles in Microsoft's even newer indie game release program called Xbox Live Arcade. It sold for 400 Microsoft Marketplace points, which back then was more or less $5, so a decent price for a smaller in scope experience. It was basically an expanded and polished beyond belief version of a minigame originally found as an unlock in Project Gotham Racing 2, and it very quickly gained traction and popularity, instantly becoming one of the most played games on the system. And if you have any doubts about it, let me assure you, all of it was deservedly so. Geometry Wars, despite its misleading title, is not a simple mob game for kids, in which you and the opponent are drawing geometrical shapes and then coloring them in with crayons, all the while throwing mean looks and odd-sounding grunts at each other. It's a badass action-packed twin-stick top-down arcade shooter which drops you in a tiny, innocently looking spaceship right in the middle of the action on a large grid-covered screen and spawns dozens upon dozens of different, usually geometrically shaped enemies, sending them all your way. Well, I should really say all your way all the time and all at once, to be precise, and so that you know where we're standing on the difficulty. And in essence, it's a classic arcade game, not unlike those you could find in the arcades in the 80s. At least I think so, as it was way before my arcade gaming time. So, it's a demanding non-stop shooting chaos-filled bonanza that never gives you a second of a breather, never fails to find new ways to test your reflexes and gaming skills, and is always fun to come back to and try again. And again, and again, and again. But most importantly, it's also a game that respects your time. And if you will come back to it, trying to get that bit further, to utilize what you've learned on your previous attempts, you will. Get further, that is. And you'll slowly get better and better without even realizing when you did or how. And let me tell you, it's hella rewarding to beat that score you've been looking at for months, wondering how you'd managed to get there such a long time ago, and seemingly with ease. You'll be tearing your way through bodies, cutting them down like weeds, expecting to end your run soon on one of those waves you always die at. Just to make a small, seemingly insignificant change in your gameplay style and realize that you're actually going through that previously unbeatable wave as if it was nothing. Nay, as if it was something that you've went through countless times before and are just playing based off memory alone. Those "oh shit, I've been doing it all wrong" moments are baked in, programmed straight into Geometry Wars' design, and a huge part of the fun. The enemies spawn in pre-assigned locations, usually all four corners of the screen, and are all moving in their specific way and patterns, learning of which can be immensely helpful in the long run and contribute to your high score achievements. They don't shoot, which is probably not something you'd expect from a regular game in a genre, but what they lack in firepower, they more than make up in 4C. So, creativity in their design and how they act, courage that they have, always storming straight for you, aiming to kamikaze you into non-existence, closing you off, so trying to lock you without feasible pre-planned escape pathway, and all of that in explosions and mayhem-filled orgy of colors. So once again, 4C. The design of the enemies is rather simple, with them all usually being little more than various geometrical shapes, but how they act and attack is something else. They range from simple, going straight for you drones, through those that will try to push you to the wall, dodge your shots or encircle you, all the way to those that will just straight up ignore you, being black holes and all, and doing their own thing, hoping that you'll make a mistake and fly into them yourself. Geometry Wars is a game that was designed to be played and not beaten. I mean, I'm not sure if it even has an end, I highly doubt that to be honest, as it feels like a title that will make things just that little bit worse and worse for you with each of its waves until you finally fail and die, permanently leaving a mark on the high scores table, both between friends and worldwide. But since it's a game that's near infinitely replayable and one that should be found somewhere in a dictionary next to a definition of mayhem, I can't help but recommend it. It's a feast for the senses that will overload your brain with visual and oral overstimulation and your heart with the purest, simplest and most natural form of joy you'll ever experience playing games. So go and play it. Crystalis on NES is interesting for many reasons, and we'll try to get to all, or most of them at least, as I talk about it. But it's especially curious because it's based on the idea of intertwining magic and technology. So something that another game in this video also dabbled in successfully many years later. In the far future of 1997, so a year when many important events took place, I mean Pathfinder landed on Mars, Princess Diana lost her life in a car crash, first cloned ship Dolly was born, and Titanic became the biggest box office ever, bombs fell, and following it nuclear conflict rained fire and destruction everywhere. It was known as the End Day, and it was survived by only 4 things. Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up song, recorded of MTV and kept on a lone and abandoned somewhere in the US Midwest old military warehouse VHS tape, cockroaches, humanity in little pockets of civilization here and there, and finally its drive for conflict and power, so very same thing that caused this terrible situation in the first place. But having access to the biggest cultural achievement and music hit ever made, a steady supply of edible protein, and a lot of hate for one another, societies eventually rebuilt. With how much technology was lost, however, we've turned once again to Magick to help us fill the gap that the tech left behind. And all seemed to be going the right way for a while, until one day a powerful mage decided to become even more powerful, like jump onto that 2.0 train, and began studying ancient technology and imbuing his technological creations with additional magical properties, thus becoming the first technomancer. But since we're only human, and our drive for conflict and power was one of the 4 things that survived the End Day, he went with his dark heart, focused on that power, and began using it to cause chaos and destruction. My boss's wife does that too, but she uses another word for it, one I don't fully grasp the meaning of, it's probably in Greek, French or Russian, but I think that she pronounces it as management. Anyway, in the very same time as the things were once again turning shit for humanity, and talks about the second End Day, so End Day, were heard here and there, beneath an ancient building destroyed in a landslide, in an old and forgotten village somewhere, a man awoken from a long cryosleep in which he was supposedly resting for centuries. He appears to be the prophesied the One, so you, and he's supposed to find and collect 4 sorts of elements to combine them into Crystalis, the only weapon capable of stopping the evil Technomancer. I know that the story may seem like nothing new and something you've read in books, saw in movies and experienced in other games, but it's so well told and put together, you won't really mind. If you look at Crystalis through a magnifying glass, it's impossible not to draw comparisons to NES's earlier classic, The Legend of Zelda. And no wonder, as its influences on our today's game are present everywhere. In the world design, in your adventure, in combat, in everything. But paying homage to something is not synonymous with copying it, and Crystalis manages to do its own thing. Its world is composed out of numerous multi-screen scrolling areas rather than a singular screen-flipping kingdom. There are quite a few towns where you can get better equipment, and the bosses you'll face are all interesting, challenging and fun to beat. There are also some puzzles that you'll need to tackle, often requiring you to think out of the box and use different items and spells to solve them. And minigames, which perhaps are not the best and most involving you've seen, are a nice change of pace and quite fun too. Status ailments are in the game as well, and most of them are sadly of the unpleasant kind, so poison, petrification, transformation, paralysis and diarrhea. And while it could be argued that one of them is clearly not in the game and a product of my sick imagination only, the two of petrification and paralysis could have easily been simplified and rolled into one, as they work in a similar way. And adding content to the game for the sake of there being more of it only is never a good choice. Despite the enemies being rather varied, palette swaps won't be something you'll manage to avoid, and an occasional same enemy in two different colors may visit your screen, just to be promptly removed from it with your accurate and deadly sword shot. Yes, you heard that right, sword shot. The combat, while simple, nay, basic even, is quite fun nonetheless, and the auditory cues and visual effects to all your attacks and magic look and sound appropriately satisfying. It's all perhaps limited by the NES's processing power, but within these constraints, the game looks and sounds pretty damn sweet. One thing that's a bit annoying about it though, and honestly something that the game would benefit from greatly when improved, is the leveling up process. As it stands, the combat against regular enemies is not very demanding, and leveling up only requires you to kill a lot of monsters. Nothing less, nothing more. And while it was standard by 1990 in JRPGs, having to tediously mow an enemy after enemy after enemy, it still feels rather disheartening. Worst of all, if you do it plenty enough, grind that is, no enemy will ever be a challenge for you, and you'll go through the game like a lactose-intolerant person such as myself goes through TP after eating a pint of ice cream. I could say that the enemy AI sucks a bit too, but it's 1990s game, so I'm leaving it at that and not considering it a viable downside. Interestingly enough, while technically speaking totally unnecessary, conversations with most townsfolk are surprisingly deep, and there's a lot of backstory and world building that's done through them, and they're always fun to learn something new from, talking to a random person somewhere in a small town at the end of the world. It is more than obvious that Crystalis is far from being the best JRPG on NES, but it's an original title with a fun to discover and learn few little extra tidbits of story hidden nearly everywhere, satisfying presentation and a lot of twists and turns to its plot that starts off as a post-nuclear tale just to switch it up as it unveils over time. If you're into the genre at all or enjoyed original Zelda, it's definitely worth your time. Streets of Rogue is easily the best game in this entire video. If you're someone who has a vivid imagination, don't mind random events showering your gameplay in a constant stream of super fun and unpredictable situations and game-changing occurrences, and enjoys often creating your own adventures by challenging yourself in how you approach countless often ridiculous problems. If you're not though, then the next game is most likely what you'll consider to be the best here, but we'll get to that one in a few minutes. Streets of Rogue is like a big stinking onion. Not as big as watermelon, but definitely around the size of sizable grapefruit. And as you know, there are a lot of things you can do with such onion. First of all, you may look at it and be like, damn, that's a big onion, I mean, what am I supposed to do with it? Where to begin, man? And just drop it like a hot potato, leaving it for other, simpler, easier to digest, understand and master games. And I get it, it can appear daunting at times, and especially with how much freedom it gives you to go about it, I get it, I really do. You can also take a big knife, or even better a cleaver, and chop that bad boy in half in a single fast swing, going to the heart of it in one sweep move. So you can play Streets of Rogue from start to finish in just a few hours, seeing a single small side of it, and one of the countless possible scenarios this randomly generated gem of a game can serve. And that's a correct way of playing it too, nothing wrong with that. But doing so, you're kinda robbing yourself out of a lot of fun and tinkering with its numerous puzzling mechanics. An onion is an onion is an onion too, so you can peel that bad boy as well, layer by layer, slowly uncovering its inner mechanics, removing them one by one, learning what, how and in which circumstances is possible in the game, all the caveats of it, best strategies and mechanics to use to not only master it, but also have most fun. And finally, because you know, onion can be dealt with in oh so many ways, you can grab a friend or three, and you can peel it together, alternating between crying and peeling off these pesky eye-irritating layers. Crafting probably the most fun multiplayer experience you had in years, and finding the best ways to enjoy the game. You can also fry, bake, boil, simmer that onion, use it as a tool to induce fake tears spontaneously whenever a situation you wanna play in your favor calls for that, and whatever else comes to your depraved mind. Point is, onion has a million and one plays, and so does this game. Streets of Rogue is just the weirdest, most out there and innovative feeling multi-genre mixing game that you've ever seen. If you want adventures, sure, it has them in heaps, do this, go there, bring that, use on, and numerous other what-ifs, it's all there. Wanna roleplay a little? No problem, there are tons of characters with different classes, items, skills and use case scenarios, and learning and mastering them all will take a lot of time. Fun time mind you, but still a lot of it. Is roguelike on your mind? Great, how about we randomize everything, each town, mission, enemy, friend, items, collectibles, random events, everything, and make sure that no game is ever the same. Yup, we can and we will if we decide to play this little gaming treasure. But what if I'd like to play a quiet, stealthy game, something less action-oriented and more slow and methodic? You know, hide in the shadows, steal something, double in corporate espionage, or even plant something somewhere for some reason? How about that? I think you may know answer to that one too. Yes, you can bet your sweet ass that it's in the game too. I like shooters though. I want to annihilate things, I want to see fictional bodies spreading left and right as I run around with my gun made of pixels, bullet hell shooting bodies all around. Do you see the pattern yet? I hope you do, cause that's possible too. And you know what? All of that is barely scratching the surface. There's so many of them genres mixed in you wouldn't believe, from puzzlers to tactical team shooters and everything in between. Streets of Rogue has it all. On paper, this beautiful chaotic insanity should never work. There's no way you can mix so much content in such a small title and not have it collapse under the weight of its combined stupidity. And yet, not only it does, but also in an unforgettable and hella playable way, if you give yourself time to learn its ins and outs and how to enjoy it. Each level that the game will uniquely generate for you will be entirely different to any other you've played before and host a slew of different missions and objectives, most of which can be completed in at least 4 or 5 ways. Yes, you've heard that right, I said at least. I mean, imagine a situation where you're tasked with recovering some kind of a document that's stashed in a safe in a high-tech office building, currently overridden and protected by bad gangsters. You can obviously arm yourself to the teeth, run in guns blazing and hope for the best. Also that the cops won't notice you doing so, which is always an option. You can also hack your way in if you have the tools, skills and know-how, locking all the guards in the rooms and leaving the main door wide open for you to just walk in and grab the file. Or you can sneak in, avoiding detection and enemy fire. But you may as well hire some goons of your own and send them there to deal with the gangsters, and when they do, just walk in and grab what you need. Or, and that's an option too, you can blow the generator with explosives, shutting all the cameras, automatic doors and security down, and opening the entry through a nice and comfortable large hole in the wall. And that's just a few things that you can do and barely a few applicable to this sample situation. But you know what? You're not always alone. I did mention after all that it's best in co-op, right? So how about one of you makes some noise, or even straight up knock on the door, drawing the guards away while the other sneaks in. Or better yet, couple of you will draw them all out one by one, while the others will knock them out from behind, removing all the security from the premises, one bump on the head at the time. I think you are beginning to imagine all the countless possibilities, the fun that the game can offer and how big of an adventure it can be. And good, because I bet that you are, and even that you're on the right track. But what I told you about it, and what you think you know of it already, is still a big ol' nothing. And Streets of Rogue has much more to offer. Each playthrough, each win or fail or even incomplete attempt at something, whatever. All of that slowly allows you to unlock new character classes, and there are literally dozens of these, and each of them has their own unique gameplay mechanics, strong and weak sides, and specialties. There are also statuses, which you can acquire by eating or drinking something, or even performing a particular feat, known to you or otherwise, that will allow you to have a very unusual and game-changing mechanic added to your already one-of-a-kind character, as that another additional layer of what/who he is. On top of it all, there are dozens upon dozens of different missions, objectives if you will, that you'll be tasked with, hundreds of items used in different ways to achieve different effects, and a whole lot of random. But most of all, as the name stipulates, it's a descendant of Rogue in the light iteration, so roguelite, so each death is not only permanent, but also a teaching moment. Moment teaching you a lesson that you will never notice learning while having a lot of fun. But to end it all here with at least one thing out of everything I just said that you may actually find to be handy when playing, remember, even the best plans are subject to the aforementioned random, and Streets of Rogue is a king of random. And even the smallest, seemingly insignificant things that can, and very often will happen in it, may cause a snowball effect of mayhem and unpredictability that may be as devastating to your progress as it will be fun. And even more so in a group of up to 4 of you playing together, having drinks, and the best gaming night in years. Arcanum of Steamworks and Magick Obscura is a top-down isometric role-playing and easily one of the best and most interesting RPG games ever made. Many of the folk who worked on earlier Fallouts were involved in creation of Arcanum, and that influence is more than prominent throughout everything that the game is made out of. From character creation, through quests and entire questlines, multiple solutions to many problems, and even combat. Basically, everything that made Fallout great, short of its post-apocalyptic setting, is here and as good as it could be in 2001. In fact, I may and will be referencing Fallout here a lot today. But when talking about the game that's borderline genius, it's only natural comparing it to the one that was of equally high quality. While on the face value the world of Arcanum is entirely different to the retro-futuristic atom-fueled take on the 1960s of Fallout, there are some similarities between them. It is also a mixture of entirely different concepts, namely fantasy-based magic and races, rapid progression and innovation, rooted in steampunk technology, along with Victorian English setting and overall world themes. It sounds like an explosive concoction that should never work, and yet, similarly to Streets of Rogue, not only it does, but also oh so well. And it's visible all throughout, even from the moment when you create your character and have to settle on either going for magic or tech, as these two are mutually exclusive. Sure, you can add different characters to your party, but each of them leans towards one or the other. It's an interesting duality of inner conflict between traditional values and progress, and one that the game allows you to explore while playing at your own pace and drawing your own conclusions and comparisons to real life. You know, like to politics for instance, which I will not mention again. Arcanum also allows you to find different solutions to different situations you'll encounter, and depending on your choices, these solutions may influence your entire adventure. Same as Fallout, Arcanum is very big, nearly entirely open to explore for when you start playing, and open-ended, letting you follow the plot of it as it unveils, but also to a certain degree, craft your own stories and adventures, be it based on your choices or random occurrences you'll participate in. So, you can roleplay it all to your heart's desire in Arcanum, which is always fun. The morale system is back too, and you can be anywhere on the good/evil spectrum, changing the world and people around you and seeing the outcome of these changes in real time. In short, you can be whomever you'd like to be, but you'll need to be ready to face the potential consequences of your actions and choices. All that theoretical freedom aside, the story, while starting off in a bit vague note, is actually excellent, suspenseful, full of twists and turns, and most importantly, difficult moral, philosophical and social choices. After making some of which, you'll find yourself wondering what if, and what if the ones that you've made are really the right ones. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you make a game that unknowingly gets you so involved in it that you begin to care. Still, even with plethora of skills to level up and then use in countless in-game situations, characters you can have your avatar become, alignments to pick for it and underlying duality of the entire world of Arcanum, it's not a perfect game. You can replay it near infinitely, portraying entirely different characters each time, crafting completely unique experiences and having fun for hours on end, but it's clear that it could take a couple extra months or so of QA. The balancing is not its strongest suit, and certain character builds are noticeably more impactful or easier to play with than others. Though arguably, that particular imbalance kinda reflects real life perfectly. And from that point of view, it's not a mistake in video game design. It's the years of gaming that programmed us to expect that all main possible character builds will always be, if not equal, then at least similarly viable in completing their narrative stories. So while it may not be an issue with Arcanum itself, it is most definitely one with us, gamers. And while perhaps it's not good that we've grown comfortable expecting that fake balance, it is what it is. And at the release of Arcanum, it was one of the main things people complained about. Additionally, some quests, not many but a few, feel a bit rushed, as if some kind of arbitrary date just had to be reached with the game and the devs did not have much time to polish them. And there's one I believe that's just straight up unfinished and broken and you can't complete it at all. It doesn't stop you going through this entire, gigantic and super fun adventure mind you, but it makes Arcanum feel a bit rushed. There are three types of combat in Arcanum: real-time, semi-turn-based and turn-based, but I've never touched any other than turns, so I can't personally vouch for the others. Turns however are fantastic and work the same way they did in Fallout. Arcanum's presentation is a little bit of a mixed bag, as while the graphics are functional and on the similar level to the post-apocalyptic classic I keep mentioning in every second sentence here, they're hardly of 2001's quality. They don't get in the way or look fugly though, not what I'm saying here whatsoever, they are just a bit lacking. Sounds and music, however, especially the latter, are fantastic and fit to the on-screen action perfectly. Story-wise, you're a guest aboard luxury Zeppelin IFS Zephyr's maiden voyage from Caldon in the Kingdom of Arland to Tarant, one of the most technologically advanced and science-focused cities in the entire unified kingdom. The idle and peaceful flight is interrupted by the unexpected attack of the two monoplanes, and they shot it down. When the dust settles, there seem to be only two survivors of the crash: an old gnome who's mortally wounded and you. And just before he dies, he gives you a mysterious silver ring and tells you to find the boy, whatever that may mean. Perhaps it's Beyoncé's next big single hit and you're after the raw recordings. Or perhaps it's something else. Like, you know, having to find the boy that may be crucial for one reason or another. We will never know. Well, actually we will know when we play the game, so do play it. And with Virgil, a sole witness to the crash, seeing how you've escaped death unscathed, proclaims you the Living One, a reincarnation of an ancient deity, and offers to follow you wherever the life may take you. Also, whether you want him or not, he will. He will shadow you and be a medieval fantasy stalker kind of a companion. And this is where your long and incredibly fun adventure begins. If Arcanum ever falls in your lap and you've not had a chance to experience it before, make sure to fix it. Aren't all of these just the best? Don't answer, I know we agree, we just have to. But, just to be sure that I'm not wrong, if you like the video, hit that like button below, and if you want to make sure to be notified whenever I release a new one, mash that bell down there too. So, take care of yourself, eat good food, look as cool as you usually do, and play games.